Alright. What's good, y'all? What's good? What's going on, everybody? This is Antoine Charles, and right now you are rocking with me on my journey to my N10 008 exam journey to get my Network Plus certification. I ain't. Never mind the background and all that. If you can't tell, I'm from New York. But yeah, never mind my background right now. It's crazy. It is wild. It's wild hot in New York City. So I got my AC going. You know, if you hear little stuff in the background, whatever the case may be, we are low budget. We don't have an amazing condenser mic to cancel out all of the room tone and AC in the background. So you gotta pardon me about that. Thank you very much. We are all about the knowledge here. Okay? So, if you don't know, I am currently a managed services engineer 1, tier 1. Woo woo! It's been a minute. I got my real IT job literally about it makes a year and change, honestly. So I'm blessed to come from my background and able to turn it around so quick, and I just attribute that to working hard, studying, having a good support system, and just soaking up all the game. To be honest with you, that's one thing you got to do: soak up the game. So that's what I'm doing right now, soaking up the game. So without further ado, we are going to go straight to it. One of my favorite, if not the favorite, resource that I use for studying the Network Plus is Professor Mesa. He knows his thing. Trust me, he's a great resource to have, especially if you're on a budget and you don't want to spend any extra money on boot camps and classes and things like that. Professor Mesa is a great resource. I got the playlist for the Network 10 Network 008 test. So we're gonna go through the objectives. As a matter of fact, you probably might not be able to see it, but I'll pull it up. Let's see here. Yeah, you might not be able to see it, but let's see if it's just you can see it in the recording here. Nah, you can't see in the recording. This thing is, yeah, you can't see in the recording, but I would just advise you to Google Network Plus N10008 objectives, and you'll see all the objectives, and Professor Mesa goes down to the T every objective in order. That's how his videos are organized in that order. So first one will be networking fundamentals 1.0, and this one is 1.1. Compare and contrast the OSI, or open systems interconnection, model layers, and encapsulation concepts. So encapsulation and decapsulation is pretty much how information travels from one layer to your machine, or rather all the layers. So that's like how information is passed through literally your Ethernet cable, or rather from a bit, from the bit, meaning that binary zeros and ones to whatever the destination is. So that is the OSI model. So it literally details how information is passed through on a network. So that is what we're going to go through right now. The OSI model is 7 layers. I should know this back and forth and back, but it doesn't hurt to go ahead and study and do a refresher, brush up on it. It has been a minute before I really dived in. It's been a minute since I dived into it completely. So this background noise is killing me, bro. It's killing me. Fab voice. Let me open the window. I bet it's a little bit better. So, without further ado, Professor Mesa, take it away.
For any amount of time.
Oh yeah, by the way, I'm gonna be stopping sometimes just to kind of reiterate and help myself study, which means like just to regurgitate and reiterate what he says to kind of like drive it home in my mind. So, pardon me if I stop and speak. You feel me? But I'm gonna mute up. Go ahead, Professor Mesa.
Time in information technology, you'll certainly hear someone refer to a layer of the OSI model. This stands for the Open Systems Interconnection Reference Model, and it's a way to describe the way that traffic is moving from one part of the network to another. As the name implies, the OSI model is a model. It's a guideline. It's a very broad way to describe the way that data moves across the network. And it allows us to communicate with other IT professionals in a way that we both can understand exactly what we're talking about. If you do any type of research into the OSI model, you may see references to the OSI protocol suite. The OSI protocols themselves didn't catch on, and in fact, today we use primarily TCP/IP. But the OSI model, which was built around those OSI protocols, continues to be used as a reference when we talk to other IT professionals. The OSI model consists of these 7 layers. You can see them represented here on the left side of the screen. And at each layer of the model is a set of protocols. And these protocols may be very different depending on the type of traffic going over your network. You'll use this OSI model for the rest of your career. It's a common language that we can use within IT to help describe how data is progressing from the very beginning of the traffic flow to the very end. One common way to memorize these different layers of the OSI model is to start at the top with the application layer through the presentation, session, transport, network, data link, and physical layers. One common way to remember the different layers of the OSI model is to remember the mnemonic, all people seem to need data processing. And those initials for each one of those words
Real quick, just to jump in here, because a Professor Mess is going to actually tell you right now. Also, probably during this video, but then the mnemonic, all people seem to need data processing. That also, there's another one. My fault, y'all. But what I was gonna say is that there's 2 mnemonics. I forgot the other one, but that one right there is actually the de-encapsulation process, meaning that is the process of you receive, or rather you receiving, not you receiving, but depending on how you're looking at it, you are sending out information instead of you receiving information. So if you look at all people seem to need data processing, right? It's detailing the way information travels from layer 7 to 1. So from, let's just say, if it's navigating the WAN or the internet, right? So if you're sending, or in this case, you're requesting to view. It's the playoffs, right? Heat versus the Warriors. I want to watch it on. I want to watch it on my iPad, or I want to watch it on ESPN.com. I got the subscription. I pull it up on Chrome, right? That pulling up on Chrome is going to send a request, right? It's a whole series. It's literally a process. It's going to send a request, which is going to span a whole bunch of routers, and it's going to go to the ESPN server, right? Which is their layer 1, and then that is essentially all people seem to need: data processing. So that actual process of me pulling up the game on my computer is from layer 7 on down to the physical layer, which is their server. So that is the de-encapsulation process. Yeah, de-encapsulation process, because you're depending on how you look at it, but it's really the de-encapsulation process, and then you're receiving the video is the encapsulation process. So carry on, Mister. Sorry about that.
Respond to application, presentation, session, transport, network, data link, and physical. Let's start our talk about the OSI model at the very bottom. This is layer 1, or the physical layer of the OSI model. And although we're talking about the physical part of the network, a lot of what happens at this layer 1 is really about the signaling, or the signal that's going over the network connections. For layer 1, we're talking about the cables that you're using, the fiber runs, or just the ability to get signal from one part of the network to the other. If someone tells us that we're having a physical layer problem, then we'll want to look at the cabling that we're using, make sure that all of our punch-down connections and connectors are working the way they should. We may want to run loopback tests. We may want to check or replace the cables that we're using, or perhaps even swap the adapter cards to make sure that we can resolve these layer 1 problems. The next layer of the OSI model is
Yeah, I don't wanna gloss over what he just was talking about, which is very essential, especially in production environments, which is a live environment. In addition to what he's saying, the OSI model is a great tool to use when troubleshooting any type of networking issue. Pardon me if I may have a sniffle, because the extreme change of weather from the AC to the give me a second. All right, so it's a great troubleshooting tool, right? So let's just say you work in help desk. You get a call. Oh, I can't connect to the internet. I can't, I can't. First thing you always want to check, ma'am, sir. Okay, you can't connect to your internet. Okay, fine. Is everything connected? I repeat, is everything connected? Because that's something that you definitely want to check out. If a device or a machine is not receiving any type of signal or can't connect to the internet, you always want to check the cabling, whether it is the Ethernet cable being connected to the device or the machine, whether or not if it's getting power, whatever the case may be. You always want to check the physical layer. Make sure everything is connected. If it's a bigger network problem, which will mean that it might be in the closet, and you want to check that too, which sometimes is the case. He says punch downs. It could be a bad patch cable that is connected to the patch board, meaning that that is essentially the cabling that connects your wall plate, your RJ45 wall plate, to the patch panel. And then that could be a bad cable. You never know. You know, it could even be a bad cable from that patch panel to the switch. It really depends. You know, but for the surface layer, I mean, just off the surface, you always want to double check. Pardon me. You always want to double check to make sure that cables are connected, and just to make sure cables are connected, everything is seated tightly, so that way you avoid an hours of work when it could just have been solved within a few minutes. So very important. Layer 1, physical. Continue, Professor Messer.
Resolve these layer 1 problems. The next layer of the OSI model is layer 2, or the data link layer. This is the layer that is a foundational layer for the protocols that we will then begin to stack on top of layer 2. You'll find that layer 2 is sometimes referred to as the data link control, or DLC layer, and there will be a series of protocols that run as DLC protocols. A good example of this is on Ethernet networks, where we use the media access control addresses, or MAC addresses. We sometimes will refer to those as layer 2 addresses because they correlate back to the data link control protocols. And since switches make their forwarding decisions based on these MAC addresses, we sometimes will refer to layer 2 as the switching layer. This image describes communication at layer 2. You can see the MAC address of this network interface card and the MAC address of this network interface card, and any communication between those two that is using that MAC address we can refer to as a layer 2 communication. If we move up one layer in the OSI.
Thank you, Professor Messer. Let me go back a little bit. So the data link layer is like he said, it's a communication between, it's the layer where the machines start to communicate over the LAN, not over the WAN, over the LAN, local area network. You know, so if you have a if you have a Bluetooth, and if you have, so from the just the standard, you know, your machine, and if you have if you're in the crib and you have your computer and you want to send some stuff over to your other computer, which is downstairs, if you just happen to have maybe a little server that you have for like your movies and stuff like that. If you know, we don't encourage piracy here, but if you have a server, and you want to access it, servers have MAC addresses, so you over the LAN accessing the server, you getting the resources, and then that's what's going on the data link layer. Everything across the LAN, local area network, and not going past yet to the internet. Switching. Anything more sophisticated requires a switch, managed or unmanaged. But to make a long story short, this is the layer where MAC addresses are learned and information is forwarded based on the MAC address. MAC address, MAC, media access control address. Every device, I mean almost damn near every device, has a MAC address, a physical address that is unique to that device. I'm talking about from IP phones to docking stations. Docking stations. Your phone has a MAC address. Servers, firewalls, routers, switches, anything that has a NIC or can communicate over the internet usually has a MAC address. So just throwing it out there. Right. And the DLC protocol, we're gonna learn more in later videos, is a protocol that helps encapsulate frames and information on layer 2 to get it to the destination MAC address, or the destination MAC address over, the LAN or the WAN, however you want to call it, based on the destination. So we're gonna learn that going forward, later videos. You'll see DLC, very important. Keep that in mind. And the link layer. Oh yeah, layer 2 is also known as the link layer. Just keep that in mind as well. That's why it's called data link layer, because it is a my fault, Professor Messer, my fault. Sorry about that. Go ahead.
As a layer 2 communication. If we move up one layer in the OSI model, we're at layer 3, or the network layer. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as the routing layer, because this is the layer associated with IP addresses. IP addresses are obviously very common on our networks, and any device that is making forwarding decisions based on these IP addresses is communicating at layer 3. This is also the layer where frames will be fragmented or broken into smaller pieces in order to move those between different types of networks. So if you move between an Ethernet network off to a WAN network and then back to Ethernet, you may find that the data is being fragmented, and that fragmentation is occurring at layer 3. Layer 4 of the OSI model is the transport.
My fault, Professor Miss. I gotta jump in real quick. Let me go back real quick. So we in network layer 3, L3, networking layer. Yep. Some people, in the real world, you're gonna hear a lot of people say routing, but you're gonna hear a lot of people saying switching. Pretty much. I don't want to get into it, but you're gonna hear that also. But network layer is dealing with the routing of IP addresses, to make a long story short, and the unit of information that is used to the unit of information that is used to if I'm not mistaken, to send information from one device to another device over the internet is packets. Frames is layer 2, but it's interchangeable sometimes. But the main objective is that, like he said, it fragments information or frames to travel to different networks, the internet being one of them. And just for clarification, the internet is a bunch of LANs interconnected. It's huge. So the internet is a WAN, the WAN is a LAN. The internet is a WAN, the WAN is a whole bunch of LANs connected to each other, creating the beast that is the internet. So just to kind of keep that in perspective. So but to bring it down to surface level, the routing layer deals with the routing of IP addresses across the WAN, or multiple WANs, or multiple networks. There you go. Sorry, Professor Messer. Go ahead, man.
Is occurring at layer 3. Layer 4 of the OSI model is the transport layer. Sometimes you'll hear this referred to as the post office layer because this is the layer that describes how data is being delivered and where it is being delivered into a system. The protocols used at Layer 4 are protocols such as TCP, that is the Transmission Control Protocol, and UDP, which is the User Datagram Protocol. This layer is used when you're accessing a web page, but the web page itself is so large that you can't send all of the data across the network in one single frame. Instead, you'll have to split it up into separate frames and send those individual pieces across the network where they're put back together on the other side.
My fault. I'm so rude. I'm a Brooklyn boy. It gonna take to get used to. You understand, Professor Messer? Sorry about that. Layer 4, the transport layer. TCP and UDP. It just think of it like he said. Really, the post office layer. It all dependent on what. How can I frame this? If IP addresses are used to route information across multiple networks, right? Layer 4 helps get that information where it needs to go, if that makes any sense. Reason I say that is because based on what protocols you are using will determine where or how specific the address. Oh my gosh. Okay. All right. We're gonna get into it later on, but just to let you know, to break it down, TCP, it needs acknowledgement for the delivery. So imagine back in the day, pretty much now it's back in the day. When somebody drops a package from UPS to your doorstep, they don't even drop it. They actually ring your doorbell and ask for delivery, right? Cool. That is TCP. It needs the acknowledgement that you got this, right? Cool. And that applies to several protocols use TCP. Now you have UDP. UDP is like Amazon Prime. It just drop on your doorstep. They don't even ring the doorbell. They're like, here you go. We out. We don't have no time to acknowledge. Either you got it or you didn't. And we're just going to keep sending it. Yeah, so that's Amazon Prime is UDP pretty much. It's just, okay, you're going to keep ordering from us. And then we're going to keep giving you your products, okay? And listen, we got too much. We're just going to keep giving it to you. That's it. You got it. If you don't, go to the website and ask them. Go to the website and put that you didn't get it, and we'll just replace your money, whatever the case may be, right? Cool. That is Amazon Prime. That is UDP. All right. They don't listen. That is and with UDP is you're gonna find it's really more so a lot of media protocols, like for VoIP and even a lot of broadcasting protocols. A lot of protocols that deal with media. So streaming services, they're gonna use UDP because they can't afford to drop any frames. Frames meaning that in terms of video, they can't afford it. Imagine TCP being video, acknowledging every frame. That means it's going to lead to a lot of jitter and a lot of buffering. I'm trying to watch the game. I don't care. about acknowledgement. Just give me the game. And that's what UDP does. It's just going to keep delivering information seamlessly, so that way it results in a great quality stream, broadcast, so on and so forth. So Professor Messer, my bad. I'm so rude. I apologize. My fault. I'm just gonna mute up again. Sorry, man.
Pieces across the network where they're put back together on the other side. Layer 5 of the OSI model, or the session layer, is designed to start and stop communication between one endpoint and another. This is where you would use control protocols or tunneling protocols in order to begin the communication of data between one device and another. For example, one device may ask in a browser, "Can we talk?" And it's communicating that information to Google, which will then set up a session and begin transferring information. OSI Layer 6 is the presentation layer, and just before we're information, for example, point layer the other side. Layer 5 of the OSI model, or the session layer, is designed to start and stop communication between one endpoint and another. This is where you would use control protocols or tunneling protocols in order to begin the communication of data between one device and another. For example, one device may ask in a browser, "Can we talk?" And it's communicating that information to Google, which will then set up a session and begin transferring information.
Okay. My fault, Professor Messer. I had to ask you to run that back real quick. Communication management between devices. We're talking about L5, layer 5. Start, stop, restart. That is I see that a lot of times in the services in Windows and stuff like that. But for the most part, Layer 5 has to deal with I'm glad you mentioned tunneling. Tunneling is the tunneling protocols. A big example of a tunneling protocol or idea, protocol, is VPN. VPN is actually, it's not the protocol, pardon me. I think IPsec or SSL is SSL VPN is we're gonna see it later on, but it just forms of VPNs. So IPsec and SSL VPN are forms of VPN, and those are tunnels that is used to directly connect to your network, your domain. So if you're working remote, which was a lot of people during the pandemic, that was a big thing. There was setting up their VPNs, and even it's still big now, so that way they could work remote, set up their VPNs, and tunnel to their network. So whether it be directly to their network or to their data center, which is going to allow them access to another site, which is a whole nother complete. Just know, VPN lives in layer 5. My fault. Yeah, VPN lives in layer 5. So just to kind of give you an idea. Okay, cool. Let's go. I owe you lunch, Professor. That's my fault.
OSI Layer 6 is the presentation layer, and just before we're able to view information on our screen, the presentation layer needs to take this data and put it into a form that we can understand. Anything dealing with the encoding of characters or encryption of application data will occur at Layer 6. This layer is often combined with the application layer at Layer 7 because the functionality is so closely associated with our ability to use these applications. Layer 7.
I gotta interject here. I'm sorry, Professor. I'm just, oh my gosh, my goodness. I'm a horrible person. Sorry. But layer 6 presentation layer, just to encryption, decryption. That's all you got to know. For the most part, I should say, for the most part, it's encryption and decryption. So, a lot of TLS, a lot of SSL, any like for any emails or any information that you need encrypted, so that way, for security purposes, it often gets encrypted here or decrypted in this layer. So if I have to send an email to somebody and I gotta send the password, right? I'm gonna encrypt that email and they're gonna have it decrypted in this layer, which is right before the application layer. So that way they can see that password, and then that password is seen, and you're gonna see how it happens. But yeah, so encryption, decryption happens in this layer. Yeah. My bad. Continue.
Closely associated with our ability to use these applications. Layer 7 of the OSI model is the application layer, and this is the layer that we get to see. As humans using a computer, we go to a browser screen and start a browser session, and this information that we're seeing on the screen is the Layer 7 application data. If you're transferring a file with FTP or performing a name resolution with DNS or simply using a browser with HTTP or HTTPS, you're using an application layer protocol. Let's now take these very broad concepts with the OSI model.
Yes. So application layer. So like I was talking about the email, look at that. POP3 is a protocol that is used for emails. When you're receiving emails. That's POP. Yeah, it's POP3. When you're receiving emails, so it's like it's one of the earlier ones. It's still being used today, but not really as much. But POP3 just as an example. If I want to send an email, right? Or rather, I'm getting an email that's something encrypted. It will be when I decrypt it, I'm gonna receive it from a protocol like POP3, and I'm gonna see it in my Google on my Gmail. So that's one. HTTP. If I'm getting any web traffic, anything that has to do with web traffic, HTTP. That's the protocol that allows me to view information from a web page. So that's the actual layer that we see that's visible. Cool. Got your back, Professor Vesta. See, yeah.
Protocol. Let's now take these very broad concepts with the OSI model and try to associate them back to practical real-world examples. Let's look first at layer 1, or the physical layer. If you're holding a cable or you're looking at an analysis of signal going across the network, then you're working at the physical layer of the OSI model. If you're working with switch forwarding or you're examining the MAC address of a device, then you're working at layer 2, or the data link layer. Moving up to layer 3, or the network layer, we're now working with IP addresses. So if you're working with routers that make forwarding decisions based on IP address, then you're operating at layer 3. Layer 4, or the transport layer, deals with UDP and TCP protocols and the port numbers associated with TCP and UDP. Layer 5, or the session layer, is our control layer. We're tunneling information or setting up communication between one device and another. Layer 6 of the OSI model, or the presentation layer, is commonly associated with encryption. If we're communicating to a web browser over an HTTPS or encrypted communication, then we're working at OSI layer 6. And lastly, the web browser that we're viewing and the information that's on our screen is able to be shown to us thanks to OSI layer 7, or the application layer.
All right, cool. All right, so Professor Messer broke it down. Ironically, before earlier videos, his genre was more detailed, but you can see pretty much everything. So cables, fiber, and the signal itself. The unit that is used, of course, is bits, zeros and ones through the cables, right? And even hubs were thrown in there as well. But they just want to give you a my echo. I don't know. Yeah, but they just want you to get the gist of it. So cables and fiber and the signal itself. That is in the physical layer. Layer two is the unit is used is frames, and in the layer two data link layer, right? Data link layer is MAC addresses communicating to each other. So the learning of MAC addresses, the forwarding of information based on MAC addresses, that is in layer two. And if you look at it, the EUI, right, that is the MAC address. I think the first 3 octets is the manufacturer, and the last 3 octets is the ID. So pretty much this is where I'm from, but I'm me, if that makes any sense. You know what I'm saying? So the manufacturer is the first 3 octets, and the unique ID is the last three to a MAC address. And switches. Woo, switches. Yes, you're going to get into some switches later on, boy. We're going to get into some switches, but yeah, switches definitely, switching definitely occurs in layer two within the LAN, within your broadcast domain. You understand? All that learning and forwarding of frames all happen in layer two. Layer three is the routing of information based on a source and destination IP. So they route packets based on, again, source and destination IPs, which is the IP address. Cool. Transport layer is how the vehicle. Yes, layer three is the routing of it, but then how it gets there, that's where layer four comes in. So how it gets there is it can be encapsulated in the TCP protocol or the UDP protocol, and it could be a segment or a datagram. Remember we talked about TCP, acknowledging the fact that, okay, we got it. Did you get it? Yeah, we got it. If you didn't get it, then we're going to resend it. UDP, don't care. Remember, UDP is Amazon Prime. They going to just deliver it and be out. That's it. Layer 5. Layer 5 is control protocol. I'm actually getting to that more off of this to kind of get an idea what more of an idea what control protocols are, and tunneling protocols. Yep, that's VPN, GRE, all that good stuff. Layer 6, encryption, decryption. Like I said before, you remember SSL, TLS? Yep, those are the protocols that are used to encrypt data. To encrypt data, security, all that good stuff. And then once you get it, you're able to decrypt it. And then once you decrypt it, layer 7, you get to see it. You get to see the game. So you get to see your email. So yeah, that is everything with your eyes, emails, web browsing, things like that. Continue, Professor Missile.
Thanks to OSI Layer 7 or the application layer. Another practical view of the OSI model can be seen in a packet capture application. In this case, I'm using Wireshark to capture data going across the network. And there are 3 windows that you can see in this Wireshark communication. The view at the top is the summary view. Each line that's within that summary view is showing us one frame that's going across the network. At the bottom of the screen is a hexadecimal and ASCII representation of that data. But where we want to focus is the middle window, which is the detailed window. In this detailed window, we can see each part of this communication broken out into the separate OSI layers for a single frame. For example, we'll look at this frame number 88 that's currently selected. Frame 88 shows us that it's using 2005 bytes on the wire, and that is describing the traffic that is being received at layer 1 or the physical layer. Just underneath that is a line of information showing this is an Ethernet 2 frame. It shows a source MAC address and a destination MAC address, which means that it's referring to layer 2 or the data link layer. To see layer 3 information, we go to the next line, which is showing us Internet Protocol or IP, and we know if there are IP addresses, such as the ones listed here, then we must be working at layer 3 or the network layer. The next line underneath the layer 3 information is the layer 4 information. In this case, it's the TCP protocol using a port number of 18429 as the source, and the destination port is the HTTPS protocol using port 443. All of those TCP communications are occurring at layer 4 or the transport layer. Not uncommonly, you'll often see layers 5, 6, and 7 grouped together. And in fact, in Wireshark, we see it grouped together here as well. You can see there is the secure sockets layer, which is the final line in this detailed view. And that particular secure sockets layer details the session, presentation, and application layer traffic traversing the network. Each time you use an application or send traffic over the network, you can describe this communication in the context of the OSI model. Let's take, for example, an application like Google Mail. We'll log into Google Mail at mail.google.com, and as we are using that application on our screen, we're using OSI Layer 7 or the application layer. If we're sending information back and forth to our browser, everything being communicated to this mail server at Google is being encrypted. And it's being encrypted thanks to the presentation layer at layer 6, which is using SSL encryption. Layer 5 is the session layer, which is linking together everything above at the presentation and application layer to all of the traffic below that will be traversing the network. And just below that layer 5 is the layer 4 transport information. We know that this communication is probably going to use TCP 443, which means that we'll be using the transport layer to send that TCP data. There's, of course, IP addresses that are used between your workstation and the Google email server, and all of that communication is occurring thanks to the IP encapsulation associated with layer 3 or the network layer. All of that TCP and IP traffic is being encapsulated within Ethernet frames, and those Ethernet frames are being sent over the network thanks to layer 2 or the data link layer. And lastly, the physical signals to be able to send these frames from one device to another are occurring at layer 1 or the physical layer. By separating the network communication into this well-known series of layers, you're able to communicate with other IT professionals when you're troubleshooting, examining applications, or trying to get an understanding of how applications may be working over your network.
My fault, Professor Messer. You did a great job. Thank you so much. But why did you have to put this thing on my... goodness gracious, man. There you go. Cool. I went too far, Professor Messer. My fault. My bad, y'all. Yeah. So, yeah. like I said before, so shout out to Professor Messer. He pretty much broke it down, especially in this context of giving an example of how you would get your email from beginning to end. So look at to where the session layer is, link the presentation to the transport. We're gonna get more into the session. Well, we talked about the session, but in terms of the control protocols and tunneling protocols, which, like he said, links the presentation to the transport after the TCP encapsulation, and then the presentation is the SSL encryption, and then boom, we get our email. So we're gonna take a quick break because my head hurts. We'll be right back. Yes.
The application.
Okay, Professor, I'm coming back. I'm coming back. Don't worry, I'm coming back, man.